Okay, guys and girls, let's take a look at how we can solve these problems for Boris Johnson. What I have on the screen here is some sample data. I want to make this very clear. This is not real data, and these are not real people or patients. And the way that I've got my data organized is how I believe the government might have organized their data. And that is, I have my column headings listed in column A, and then I have my data running horizontally across the spreadsheet. Now, I only have about 50 or so entries, but you can see already if I scroll across, we're getting through those columns. Now, there is over 16,000 columns in Excel, but I would imagine that if you have more than 16,000 patients and you're organizing your data like this, then you probably are going to run out of columns. So the first thing I would do here would be to switch my data around. So I'm going to click in my data, Control A to select all. I'm then going to do Control C to copy my data. And I'm just going to paste it underneath, but I'm going to do a paste special instead. And the command you want to use for just flipping your data the other way around is the transpose command at the bottom just there. Click on OK and boom, there we go. We have our data switched around very nicely. I'm then just going to delete out these rows at the top. So now having my data this way around and having a patient or a case per row as opposed to per column, I now have all of these wonderful, juicy, blank rows to complete. And the cool thing about Excel is that when it comes to rows, we have over 1 million. So plenty of room in there to add in more data. Now, one thing I can see I need to do here is I need to format column E because currently we have test dates, but they're showing in general format. And so we're getting this little number here. Now, if you're ever curious as to what this number is, if you do see it in your spreadsheet, it's basically the number of days after the 1st of the 1st, 1900, which according to Excel is when all time began. Now, all this means is that you don't have the correct date formatting applied to your column. So I'm going to jump up to my number formatting and I'm going to say short date. And just for the record, I have my Excel set to display my dates in US format for any of my British viewers who are wondering why the dates look a little bit strange. So now I have my data, which is looking a lot nicer. What we're going to do now is a VLOOKUP, which according to Twitter, and I don't trust Twitter that much, but according to Twitter, the government have also been struggling with their VLOOKUPs. Now, I think this is probably a joke, but I thought it would be a good time to demonstrate some VLOOKUP as well. So let's jump across to sheet 2. Now, what I have in sheet 2 is another smaller table, and I have the case number column completed, but I have a blank region column and a blank results column. Now, this is the important thing with VLOOKUP is if you want to do a VLOOKUP, you need to have a piece of data that is common between the two tables. So in this table, I have the case number listed out. And if I jump back to my larger table, you can also see that I have the case numbers in column A. So I'm essentially going to use the case numbers as my link between these two tables in order to perform my VLOOKUP. Now, the other thing you need to note when performing VLOOKUPs is that VLOOKUP numbers your columns. That is how you tell Excel which column of data you want to pull back. And it numbers the columns from left to right. So column A is 1, essentially, column B 2, C3, D4, E5, so on and so forth. So if I take a look at what I want to pull back first, I want Excel to look up the case number in the larger table and tell me what the region is for this particular case number. So the column I'm going to be looking up is the region column, which is column number 4. So now we've established that, one more thing we're going to do before we create our VLOOKUP. And I always do this because it makes VLOOKUPs just a lot easier. It means you don't have to mess around fixing cell references and things like that. I always like to name my data range. So I'm going to click in, Control A to select all. Then up in this little name box just above where it currently says C9, I'm going to name this range of cells. And just for laughs, let's call this Bojo's Big COVID Table of doom. Now you'll notice there when I'm naming my range that I haven't got any spaces in between those words. And that's one of the rules of named ranges. You can't have any spaces in the name. You need to make it all one name, as I've done here, or you can separate the words with underscores. The other important thing to remember to do, which I often forget, is to press the Enter key just to set that named range. So now I've pretty much established everything I need in order to construct my VLOOKUP. So let's jump back to sheet 2, and I'm going to type my VLOOKUP directly into cell B2 equals VLOOKUP, open bracket. We have our arguments underneath. The first argument that we need is highlighted in bold, and it's asking me for the lookup value. So the lookup value is always going to be that piece of common information between the two tables, which in this case is cell A2, comma, table array. So now I need to tell Excel, where am I looking up the case number essentially? Well, I'm looking it up in the table. Now, because I named my cells, instead of selecting the cell references, I can just utilize the name. So if I start to type in Bojo, you can see it comes up underneath with Bojo's big COVID table of doom. So I can very easily go in there and double click to select the table name. Now, another way of doing this, which is even quicker and is a lot better if you're like me and you have a terrible memory, and quite often you can't remember what you've called your named ranges, if you press the F3 key on your keyboard, that's going to pop up a little window, which is going to list out all of your named ranges. I can double click to select, comma, to move on to the next argument. It's now asking me for the column index number. So currently what I'm saying is look up the information that's in cell A2 in this cell range, and now I need to specify what I want to pull back. Now in this case, I'm looking for the region that this particular case falls into. And if you remember, we counted across our columns and the region was column number 4, comma. Our final argument is a true or false argument. True is an approximate match, false an exact match. So what I want to do here is I want to exactly match the case number in cell A2 to the case number in the table. So I'm going to do an exact match, which is a false argument. Now remember, with these trues and falses, you can replace true with 1 and false with 0. Close brackets, hit enter, and I get my region. What I can do now is utilize my autofill handle, which is the little cross as I hover over the bottom right hand corner, double click to copy those regions down. And that is it. It is pretty simple. So let's continue on and let's do the same thing for result. So result, if I look at my table, is column number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, column number 6 we're pulling back this time. And just for laughs, let's do this a slightly different way by utilizing our functions library. I can see that VLOOKUP is the top one in the list, so I'm going to select it and we'll use our function arguments dialog box. And this is pretty much the same as typing it into the cell, but some people do find this a little bit easier to utilize. So we want our lookup value. Now again, I'm going to use the case number A2. I need to specify my table, so I can press my trusty F3 key again and select Bojo's big COVID table of doom. My column index number is 6 in this case because I'm pulling back the result, and my range lookup, that's the true or false argument. I want an exact match of that case number, so we're going to type in false. Click on OK, double click to copy that down, and there we have our results. And that is it. I've solved all of the UK's problems. I'm just kidding. This is all in jest, but I thought I would take this opportunity to use this just to provide you with a little tutorial. I hope you enjoyed and I hope you found that useful, and I'll see you next time. Bye everyone.